Greetings and welcome to Trinity Radio. I'm Jonathan Pritchett, and along with me is Braxton Hunter.
Yes.
Right? You're here, right? Yeah, okay.
Yes. And he's Adam Coleman.
And we have Adam Coleman with us today to talk about black atheism and some other topics. Adam, how you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Doing great. Glad to be here, bro.
We're
hanging
glad
out with
to
you guys
have
on a Friday.
Yeah. Adam Coleman, you can find him on YouTube, Tru-ID, Apologetics, and he's the recently published author or contributing author to Urban Apologetics. That's from Zondervan, right?
Yes, published through Zondervan, available wherever books are sold right now. Absolutely. Urban Apologetics, Restoring Black Dignity with the Gospel. Yes, sir.
All right. How's that book?
Oh man, it's doing extremely well, man. I mean, to be honest with you, I think everybody from the authors to the publishers, quite frankly, are really shocked at how well it's doing. You know, there's a real thirst for apologetics out there. Quite frankly, I think even more so than we realize. So the book is doing great. You got some great reviews, and and most importantly, people's lives are being changed, man. So yeah.
No, that's the key right there. I'm seeing that. I'm seeing people post pictures with holding that book everywhere. So if you don't got it, go get it.
We're really proud of you for that, Adam. And I do want to add that MJ Jackson coming in with a $15 super chat. Thank you so much,
MJ.
Oh, and I have to thank one of our channel angels, as I call them,
yes,
Jason Miles, for the substantial super chat. Unbelievable, Jason. We love you so much, and I'm starting to think the show would not function without you. So thank you so much. But yeah, I don't mean to interrupt. So this is a topic, that Adam is close to your heart. You capturing Christianity, I think, and talked a little bit about this. And
sure.
The challenge is, or I think the concerns related to black atheism are nuanced from perhaps what I might be used to. And so I'm looking forward to learning from this, and I hope that you are out there too, learning. And I want to say this as we begin, guys. We always tend to think of the worldview discussions. People like us, we think about Twitter, we think about what's going on online, but also think about people you might meet in the real world and how you can use this kind of stuff with real people. Adam, kicking it back over to you, man. What is black atheism? How's it different? What do we need to know? Tell us everything.
Sure, man. Maybe I can just flash the book and say, hey, just buy the book, and I'll call it a day there. Because I wrote a whole chapter on it. Shameless plug. But anyway,
don't mind that.
Yeah. Black atheism essentially, it's not like some sort of I mean, it's you have atheism proper, you know what I'm saying? And I mean that in the classical sense, the stance that there is no God. And I understand nowadays that even that definition is controversial. So, I would expand it to say, if you say there's, you lack of a belief in God, maybe you're a lactheist, I would include that in my definition as well. But I think what's key here is that in the African American context, there tends to be things, certain themes associated with atheism that you probably wouldn't find in other contexts. So just to kind of make it, kind of use this example, we're all familiar with the moral argument, obviously. And typically, if we're given a defense for the moral argument, you were kind of working through the steps. I'm thinking about it like the typical William Lane Craig version. We might allude to something as, like the Holocaust as a, example of obvious evil, something that any rational person should agree was just dead wrong, When it comes to the African American context, you're going to look at things like chattel slavery, slavery here, in the West. You're going to look at things like Jim Crow laws, or George Floyd, or whatever it may be. There's this constellation of things in the African American experience, history, and present that tend to be very present in the mind of the so-called, Black atheists. They're really concerned about things like, justice from that vantage point, and so on and so forth. And they tend to factor that into why they don't believe in God. So whereas, you might have what we understand to be like the problem of evil, they may frame it as, well, why did God allow our people to go into slavery? Why were we on the slave ship, so on and so forth. That's going to be like the way that the problem of evil emerges in conversation, when you're dealing with, Black atheists. So essentially, I think if you're taking a bird's eye view, I think what we have going on is people trying to make sense of the human experience, just like you would in any context. And unfortunately, particularly, as statistics show in recent years, we're seeing that a number of people are turning away from Christianity and seeking those kinds of answers. As it stands now, the fastest growing group in the African American context is the nuns, as I think it is with other contexts as well. And a subset of that being atheists, where people are looking for answers to life's biggest questions somewhere outside the church, if you will. And
Adam,
so whether it be
before you continue on that, I was kind of wondering, among the nuns who are African American, do we have any idea what the percentages are like, or do you have at least a hunch? I mean, you've dealt with all this research, so you might have a flavor of things more. I wonder if what we're talking about is, are most of those nuns still in some sense, Christian? Do they think of themselves as Christians?
No, very interesting. So, according to the most recent Pew Research studies, we're looking at about 21% of African Americans now identifying as nuns, which is pretty unusual. I mean, classically, the African American community has been very churched, if you will, and so to see this rapid growth of nuns is actually pretty alarming. But about 21%, so that's like 1 in every 5, African Americans would say that they're nuns, and among those, 3%. Or nuns, right? And so, among those, like 1 out of 10 would identify as either an atheist or agnostic. The others would say something like they're just no religion in particular, or maybe spiritual, and something along those lines. They believe in maybe a higher power in a generic sense, but nevertheless would not subscribe to something as formal as Christianity, if you will.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you answering that for me. And real quick, while we've taken a pause here, I want to thank Mr. Phil Fox. Thank you so much. He says, "Big up to Adam Coleman." What?
Yeah,
you like Mr. Phil Fox?
Phil's the man. Yeah.
He's a friend.
Yeah, Phil's the man.
And did I miss another one? No, that's yeah, I got it.
Yeah, you got caught
them
up.
all.
Yeah,
I'm all caught up.
I was gonna say though, when you think of typical classical apologetics. So the kind of debates that Braxton would have with Matt Dillahunty, or his upcoming debate with Cosmic Skeptic, it's mostly ideas and philosophy and science and stuff. But it seems that when you're talking about atheism in the Black community, history probably matters as much as any of those things, whereas you don't see it in typical classical apologetics. Would that be, history is present and it's got to be dealt with?
Yeah, I think that's probably right. And in the sense that, I mean, I think most of it still boils down to the problem of evil. And that's just the historical aspect is just going to be the face of that. Um, but you do have this idea. Well, it's kind of like this twofold attack, if you will, when you come dealing with many Black atheists. It's this notion that Christianity is kind of like this irrational relic of our past, on the one hand, and then it's also this notion that when you look at our history, that Christianity and or the church has been, as some people say, like the handmaiden of white supremacy or an accomplice of, oppression and things of that nature. And so you have these different ideas, whereas again, the history would be the face of it, but kind of, following behind that, you do have this underpinning of these moral concerns that they believe Christianity can't account for. So unfortunately, it is the case. There's definitely some missteps, when it comes to the church here in the Western world. That we can definitely get into that for sure. Definitely have a problem talking about that. But that tends to be how they leverage, these more moral concerns against, Christianity. So I guess you could say like history might be the vehicle through which they're really leveraging the problem of evil. Maybe you could put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, Christian apologists typically have two ways of dealing with the ugly side of church history, and not just in the United States, but just in 2,000 years. There's, we have plenty of stuff
Sure.
that not good. And so I find that Christian apologists typically take one of two approaches. One of them is try to do the best spin possible on it. And I'm not a fan of that. And then the other side is people like me who says, yeah, we need to own all of it and then just, confess that it was wrong. But that doesn't speak to the truth of Christianity, how poorly the followers of Jesus lived up to the ideals of our founder. Whereas what I will also point out, though, even though I'm in that let's just own it camp, I also will point out that when Christians do horrible things, like they've done in church history, they're acting inconsistent with the founder of the religion, Jesus.
Right.
Whereas if you look at other religions and you see the horrible things that they're doing, a lot of times you find them acting consistent with the founder of their religion. And so I still think that that's an important difference, but I'm still on the we've got to own our dirty laundry kind of approach. So or maybe there's a third way. So how do you approach the question of church history when you're dealing with Black atheists?
Oh yeah, man. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I think that we have to, face those kinds of questions and javelins at the church head on, quite frankly. I don't think you don't want to skate around it, because then it seems as though, in my experience, most people feel as though you're being disingenuous. So let me be more explicit about it. So for example, in my context, the question is often raised, why would you be a Christian if Africans, enslaved persons were quote beat into Christianity? Now, there's a whole host of historical facts that we can bring to bear to show that that's not indeed the case, and there are a great deal of reasons to affirm Christianity, independent of how it is that some individuals came in contact with it. But nevertheless, you don't want to say something like or just be dismissive. Like, we really want to kind of tackle those things head on. It really is the case that when it comes to European missionaries throughout the transatlantic slave era, you do have this kind of unhealthy merging of European culture and missionary work, where it wasn't enough for them to preach the gospel, but Africans had to take on quote Christian names,
Right.
which really meant European names, and they had to wear Christian clothes and things of that nature. So you do have this transcendent gospel, this culturally transcendent gospel, packaged in cultural terms, and in the doing of that, you have the disservice to what the gospel is really all about. So as it talks about in 2 Corinthians chapter 6, we don't want to be a stumbling block. We ought to conduct ourselves in such a way that we're not a stumbling block to the ministry. But when the church doesn't do that, then we have to acknowledge it, and we have to point people back to Christianity proper and help people delineate between what Jesus actually taught, how he desires for the world to be one, and versus the way that it was carried out by individuals who, as you said, were acting out of step with the gospel and out of step with Jesus' teachings. So I do think that we have to tackle those things head on. And if we're being real, I think some of the difficulty in doing that sometimes is we feel maybe we may, to whatever degree we might be aware of it or not, it's almost like we get defensive. We feel like we have to defend ourselves and defend, the church and so on and so forth, when ultimately our aim should be to defend the gospel. That should be our number one aim. We should be.
I don't have to. Yeah, I don't have to defend Salem witch trials. I don't have to defend the
At
Inquisition,
all.
because Christianity is not proven false by the behavior of Christians. And
Absolutely.
even though I will say that I am, and that we have to own our dirty laundry camp, but I'm also in the camp that would say that when you do that, there's also a lot of good that Christianity has done, and I would probably argue has probably
True.
done globally probably has done the most good as a global religion. And granted, I'm putting Protestantism and Catholicism and Eastern Orthodox, any of the historic traditions of the Christian faith, I put all that in the bucket and say, yeah, there's been a lot of horrible stuff, but on balance, there's also been a lot of good stuff, and probably the greatest force of good in the world of ever. So that's also just something that's hard to dispute, and that may have to do with just the sheer numbers of Christians in church history. But
Sure.
it's still, to its credit, you do see people doing a lot of gospel work. But yeah, I'm not a fan of the run from it. I'm not a fan of the try to put the best spin on
Right.
Well, one of the interesting things that I've noticed in evangelical culture is 10 years ago, for example, you used to see in the Reformed camp, for instance, you used to see John Edwards is my homeboy t-shirts. You never see John Edwards is my homeboy. They had to throw those in the trash, right? Because now it's
Right.
Edwards wrote sermons on the back of receipts from slave purchases. And
Right.
so you do see a shift in evangelicalism waking up to the fact that there is an ugly side, and maybe we don't need to celebrate so much when you've got, granted, you've got flawed people, we're all flawed people, but
Right.
but that's just to say, but if you just say, well, we're all flawed in our own way, that's to try to, in my mind, smooth out everything as if everyone's is equally wicked at bottom. That's certainly not the case. So,
Right.
yeah. So
Oh,
you
no,
gotta
that's very real.
be realistic about these things when you're doing your apology. And I imagine you're in your context, it's that stuff gets even more amplified than just the way that Christopher Hitchens would whine about it back when he was doing his thing, right?
Well, yeah, and I think that part of the problem, and I think this is to your point, is that unfortunately, the issue of race, I think at bottom it's a moral issue. I think it's a sin issue, but unfortunately nowadays it's treated as more of a political issue. You know what I'm saying? It's if you take a certain stance about race and racism, then you are put in a political category. And maybe somebody wants to reject that political category, and in doing so, now they want to reject you and the things that you bring to the table with respect to race and whatever it may be. And I think that we had to be careful that when we're doing ministry, right, when we're evangelizing, we need to be careful not to read political layerings onto somebody who's bringing forth a legitimate moral issue, right? You may have somebody who's really grappling with, man, why is it that how could God allow Jonathan Edwards to preach his gospel and at the same time write a sermon on the back of a receipt, of a bill of sale for a enslaved person named Venus? Like, why, how would God allow something like that? Like, that's a legitimate, moral concern, right?
Sure. And so you're kind of saying,
you hear that.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Adam.
Well, no, I'm just saying, if somebody hears that And the knee-jerk reaction is like, oh, you got that from CRT, or you got that from, you're a leftist or whatever. It's like, no, actually, I'm really trying to work these things out. Like, I'm really trying to make sense of this stuff. And as Adam Coleman's going to come along and say, hey, if you're really trying to make sense of this stuff, then the best lens through which to do that is going to be the biblical worldview. And here's how. But we miss that opportunity, I think, when we read political stuff into what we would deal with in any other context as just being a philosophical or theological concern.
So so a lot of the time what we're seeing is some of the similar issues that would come up with any other discussion with atheists. It's going to be filtered through the cultural background and things like that of the individual.
Sure.
And I want to say a couple of things real quick.
Well, speaking of politics, though, I do want to put you on the spot here. You are going to
okay.
Because there's a question going to put you on the spot.
Yeah,
here
you did vote for the Featherstone Pritchett in the 2020 election, right?
Oh, absolutely. I certainly
did.
So
we don't get to blame you because you voted for the right ticket. All right, just wanted to make sure.
Right.
I wrote those two names in, and I didn't even know you were running. But let's see.
You didn't see the. Man, Chris did all this work to make our slogan.
I'll have to
make America meh again.
So, Jonathan, introverted Christian. Now, this is throwing a little bit of a hand grenade into the room. But before I do that, let me just say that someone else, who said it? Someone just, here we go. Mr. Phil Fox said, Adam is one of the most well-balanced dudes to speak on these issues. So the reason I bring that up is because you're the kind of, you guys could have an okay discussion about this. I think it's kind of important. What exactly do we mean? What does Jonathan mean by owning it? You said a while ago about our history. He says, is it just a matter of admitting that it happened, or does it mean taking responsibility as if we alive today are guilty for it? He says.
No, I don't. I'm not saying
break
that.
it down, Pritchett.
But what I am saying that we have to own up to it. So one of the things I hear is, well, from an evangelical context, those were Presbyterian when it comes to the Puritans or whatever. I'm not a Reform. I'm not, the Baptists are, I'm not. And then if you're a Presbyterian or a Baptist, that was the Catholics. That wasn't the true church or whatever. No, you got to understand, everyone nobody cares about what the differences is between these Christians and those Christians, okay? It's y'all are claiming the name of Christ, and these things happened by the church. And so one of the things that I have seen Christians do, besides try to deflect or say that wasn't the true church, right? The whole no true Scotsman fallacy, or that wasn't that was that denomination. Now, you've got to understand, these people look at it, they don't care that you're not a Calvinist. They don't care that you're not a Catholic or whatever. These are what people throughout history have been doing in the name of Jesus. And you're saying you're doing this in the name of Jesus. Well, what about that? And sometimes Christians try to deflect, or sometimes Christians try to say, well, yeah, but fewer than X amount of 1,000 people died in the Inquisition, or whatever it is that they say, as if that, okay, well, it's not as bad as you thought. No, it's still as bad as you thought, right? And what I find funny is the same people who will offer those kind of apologetics, it's not as the best spin apologetics, will also get on Facebook.
Did you call it best spin apologetics?
Best spin apologetics.
These same people will get on Facebook groups who are trying to say it wasn't as bad as you thought, this ordeal or that ordeal, and then say how absolutely reprehensible John Calvin was in the Servetus thing. You can't have it both ways. I'm sorry. I mean, the Inquisition was not that bad, but John Calvin is absolutely horrible because of the incident in Geneva. And I'm like, okay, you got to be consistent here. So I'm not saying you bear the guilt of something that Catholics did, centuries ago. What I am saying is we have to acknowledge that these things happened. They happened in the name of Christ. There's all kinds of crazy things, and you have to deal with it honestly. And you don't do best spin. You got to own it and just say, yeah, Christians have done pretty horrible things in church history. That's what I mean by own it. You agree with your adversary.
Is Jonathan right, or is he horrible? And how horrible is he, Adam?
No, I think he's really on point, man. And I mean, I'm not sure how far we want to go down this trail, but I think that there's some important nuances. I noticed that in the question, you used the word guilt. And I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I think that one thing that needs to be taken into account is that there's a distinction to be made between guilt and shame. Okay, now guilt is something for which you might feel some kind of way because you did something wrong. Shame is different. You might feel bad about yourself in regard to something that happened to you or something that happened in relation to a family member. It's not necessarily associated with anything that you did wrong or some sort of
like maybe
evil
if I have a
disposition that you
scar
have.
or some kind of disfigurement like that.
Right. And so I think that, quite frankly, I'm just going to be explicit here, whether it be American history, whether it be church history, I think some people, what they're grappling with is not so much a sense of guilt, but a sense of shame. Now, the reality
that's really good, Adam. That's helpful.
Right.
Yeah. And,
right.
well, I mean, that's how you shake up most of the world anyway. I mean, we're a guilt culture in the United States, so that's where our minds immediately go. But in honor shame cultures, this is just kind of implicit and understood already.
Sure.
Like I remember prior to, I guess it was the Houston Chronicle thing in 2019 about the Southern Baptists and the sex abuse thing, for example. I had already left the Southern Baptist Convention by then, but I remember people lobbying all the things at the Catholic Church, right? For example, over all the abuse stuff there. But even though I wasn't a Catholic, I felt that sense of shame because I know that they, whatever you make of Catholic doctrine, out there representing or saying that they represent Christ. And so to say that that's them, that's not us, it doesn't take very long for then all of a sudden, if you're in the Southern Baptist Convention throwing rocks at the Catholic Church, and all of a sudden it's us too. And then you have the Southern Baptists who don't like the fact that they had all that go on in their convention. And then you have other Southern Baptists who are like, well, each church is autonomous, so what happened that was bad in that Southern Baptist church has nothing to do with our Southern Baptist church. And at some point, you just kind of got to go, yeah, but if you don't recognize that your Southern Baptist church, by virtue of being Southern Baptist, is going to get dragged through the mud because of what that church did, you're crazy to think that you're not going to get tagged for what they did. And so you may as well just go ahead and accept the fact that you're going to get smeared because of what that church did, and then be on the side of confronting that, as opposed to trying to put some distance, because as long as you claim you're a Southern Baptist church, outsiders don't care that you have local autonomy. They don't know how the Southern Baptists care. Oh, you're Southern Baptist? Oh, well, y'all seem to be nothing but predators. Okay, you're going to get tagged with that whether you like it or not. Just like we're going to get tagged with it whether you're Reformed or not when it comes to Calvin, or if it comes to the Puritans, or you're going to get tagged if you're a Protestant whether or not you want to distance yourself from the church history and some of the things that the Catholic Church. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you think. What matters is they're going to tag you with it anyway.
Right. I mean, and here's the thing is that, so to kind of take it even further, I think that not only can you encounter this sort of shame, even if you're not directly associated or directly involved with something, but it's also both shame and esteem. They're not temporal things necessarily, right? Yeah. So what I mean by that is, in a couple of weeks now, we're gonna have July 4th, and there's gonna be a whole lot of hot dogs being roasted and burgers, being burned up, fireworks going off for something that happened in 1796, right? I wasn't there, when the revolution happened, but daggone, I'm probably going to get me a burger, veggie burger, most likely. You know what I'm saying? And likewise, when Adam Coleman comes along,
a veggie burger?
Well, yeah, I'm a provisional vegetarian. That's a whole nother story. But
okay.
Yeah,
right.
Provisional. We're gonna have some counseling session after
right. But so here's the thing: when Adam Coleman comes along and talks about slavery, and kind of how ugly that was. People say, "Oh man, that was in the past." Well, yeah, the revolution was in the past too, right? So, we're both talking about something that we weren't temporarily there for. Now, here's the clincher, though. It is the case that during the Revolutionary War, you had those who were African enslaved persons fleeing to the English and fighting against America for their freedom. That's true, and when you hear things like that, many people kind of cringe and it's like, well, where does that cringe come from? You weren't there. But I think it's that sense of shame, Now, fortunately, the gospel has an answer for that. This is why the biblical worldview is so important. Whether you're dealing with guilt or shame, at the end of the day, that's covered under the blood of Jesus, right? So you don't, I was talking on another channel a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about Genesis 3, where you have obviously the fall of man, and you have Adam and Eve going to make tunics for themselves to cover themselves up. And if you notice, what happens is when God comes along, rebukes all of them, rebukes the enemy and so forth. And what does he do? He creates coverings for them, right? In other words, their coverings were insufficient, right? They tried to cover themselves with fig leaves, and it was not up to par. Their coverings were insufficient. God had to create a covering for them to cover those sins. And I think that what we do is often when we're confronted with either our sins or things that we're ashamed of, we want to cover them up too. We want to just kind of minimize it or use various different means to cover them up. And God's like, no, the only covering that's sufficient are the ones that I've prepared for man, right? And so I think that what we need to be doing then to make it more explicit when it comes to whether it be American history, church history, your own personal history, whatever it is, going back to what Jonathan Pritchett said, what we need to be doing is confronting those things, being upfront about them, but then bringing in the gospel and showing how it is that the gospel provides a righteousness and a freedom from shame and guilt that you cannot attain just by turning a blind eye to historical realities.
Amen.
Well, amen to that. And hey, Jonathan, I just want you to know, MJ Jackson gives us a super chat and says, but wait a minute, Jonathan Pritchett, those were just men of their time. That's all that was.
Right. Yeah, let me. Okay, this is the dumbest thing.
He posted again later and said he was just being sarcastic.
Yeah, this is. Yeah, I know. I know. But he's making a joke because we talk about this a lot. The dumbest thing you can ever say is they were products of their time, because number one, it assumes that there was only one way of thinking at that time, which if you've read books, that's obviously false. And two, that there was opposition to the people of that time that did the bad things. So it's just that kind of thing is madness. So let me give you an example. We mentioned Jonathan Edwards, right? Jonathan Edwards was pretty much a bigot towards Native Americans, and he was a slave owner. Well, what about Jonathan Edwards Jr.? Jonathan Edwards Jr. loved Native Americans. Jonathan Edwards Jr. was an abolitionist. How does that happen? With it? Yes, that's true.
You're like, you should have known that, Brad.
Yeah, you should have known that, right? So I asked, they were of the same time, and in fact, they were on different sides of the issues there. And what was it that Jonathan Edwards saw in that household that makes you wonder why he was totally opposed to those kinds of things that were the dishonorable attributes of Jonathan Edwards? Now, hear me. I have Jonathan Edwards, the Banner of Truth, volumes 1 and 2 on my shelf. I have Calvin on my shelf. You don't throw that stuff out. Nobody's saying that.
Sure.
But you do have to be realistic about church history. And what I also point out is, like I said earlier, to the church's credit, it has been the greatest force of good. So on balance, has the church been good or evil? On balance, it has been really, really good, and at times really, really evil. And I agree with Adam that the biblical worldview of all have fallen short of the glory of God because we're all sinners makes sense of all that. So realistically, we should expect church history to not be perfect. If the Bible's true, and even in the epistles, you're warned about people who come in and bring in destructive forces into the church. So, that's something that you would expect to be when you have fallen humanity involved in it.
Right. Now, here's the thing, particularly when we're dealing with atheists in the African-American context, I want to go into the teeth of that discussion. I don't want to shy away from that because I think it affords me an opportunity to actually give evidence for God. So here's what I mean by that. So when we think about all the nasty stuff that's happened in church, American history, whatever, towards African Americans, African enslaved persons, what have you, if you have a problem with that, then you're presupposing a whole lot. You're presupposing that those Africans who were sold, the one that Jonathan Edwards, wrote a sermon on the back of her bill of sale, you're presupposing that those people had value, right? You're presupposing that there's some base layer of human value that ought to have been respected, and if you're going to take that step, then now I'm off and running on some sort of moral argument. As a matter of fact, in the book, I actually take that approach. You mind if I kind of share something from that real quick? Is that
Go for
cool,
it, man?
All right, cool.
You're Adam Coleman. Come
I'm,
on.
I'm
Yeah,
Adam
you don't
Coleman.
ask permission on our show. We are begging you
Right,
to be
right.
here.
You're a celebrity.
Right. So, there's this guy. As a matter of fact, let me preface it by saying this. So, a minute ago, you were talking about Jonathan Edwards and his son, and you had this really cool kind of a parallel analogy where Charles Darwin, he wrote a book called Descent of Man, and he writes. There's this passage in there where he talks about how not too long from now, he says that the civilized races will exterminate the uncivilized races. Obviously, he was referring to people that looked like me. He felt like this was going to be the outworking of the social outworking of his theory, right? But what's interesting is that you also have this guy before him named Josiah Wedgwood, who was a abolitionist. He was a potter, and he literally designed this coin where you see like the praying hands, and the enslaved person says, "Am I not a man and a brother?" Josiah Wedgwood designed that, and he was abolitionist. He was like, that was like the bat symbol, if you will, of the abolitionist movement. Now, what's interesting is that he was coming from a biblical worldview. Josiah Wedgwood was obviously, Darwin was coming from a more naturalistic perspective in making his statement. And what's interesting is that Charles Darwin is actually Josiah Wedgwood's grandson, right? Same family tree, but two totally different perspectives on the enslaved person. And what it came down to was their worldview that informed how they went about looking at slavery, so on and so forth. So worldview really matters. Now, fast forward, you have this gentleman here named Leonard Black. He was an escaped enslaved person, became a reverend. And he says this quote, it's very interesting. He says, "Is man to be considered a mere ox, to be bowed up and stall fed? Has he not a mind capable of rising higher and higher in all that is expansive, pure, and holy? Has he not within him a spark of pure divinity, which when he is surrounded by high and ennobling influences and fanned into a light so bright as to lead us to respond to the glorious truth that man is indeed made in the image of God? Do you talk of selling a man? You might as well talk of selling immortality or sunshine." So that's Leonard Black right there. And, again, he was a powerful abolitionist in the 19th century. And there's so many other quotes that I could appeal to. But one thing you see throughout the abolitionist movement is the appeal to this notion of being made in the image of God as a basis for which to make arguments against slavery. You see that time and time again in speeches and so on and so forth. And, there's this, obviously from that baseline of value being made in the Imago Dei, you can build a moral argument. But if you take God out of the picture, if everything is just kind of like this naturalistic picture, and we just kind of been, we come from nothing, for nothing, by nothing, and we just happen to be slapped together by the laws of nature, then that goes out the window. From whence do you get some sense of human value upon which we could have built anything like the abolitionist movement or civil rights movement that we've seen? And so when I'm dealing with Black atheists, that's one thing that I tend to challenge them on. It's like, hey, look, I'm with you in regard to these historical realities. Shout out to Mike Winger. That's what's up. I'm with you in terms of these historical realities. But then my question is going to be, from an atheistic perspective, where's your base layer of human value that you feel has been violated, with these enslaved Africans? Where is your ought? Where are you going to get this moral ought from to say that, they ought not to have sold, individuals into slavery and broken up families and so on and so forth? Where are you going to derive those things? I think if you're an African American and you're looking around trying to make sense of the world around you, make sense of our history, those moral elements, those identity elements, all those sorts of things are not going to be adequately addressed by a naturalistic, atheistic paradigm. If you really want to find out the answer to these things and have a coherent worldview that allows you to not only understand, but then also get involved in the brokenness in the world, then Christianity is the greatest game in town. You're not going to find anything else.
And in terms of the slave issue in both Europe and the United States, Christians were on the abolitionist side as well. So it wasn't just
Sure.
So they were on both sides of that issue. And so if you're an atheist, you have no grounding for any moral complaints about really anything, but unless you can give an account for why that was horrible, you turn that into, I guess it's the argument of evil in reverse, where the fact that you're proclaiming it evil, you need a standard or, a grounding for why you can make such an objective claim that we all agree with. And that lifts you back up to God and how Christ is the solution to the problem.
So, Adam, as I'm thinking through what you're saying, I'm sitting here thinking about myself and my own ministry and Jonathan and others. And so when I go, if I were to be talking with someone who was a black atheist and was dealing with some of those they're thinking about it from that context. When they brought it up, and I think I think I'm pretty good at being really sensitive and loving with whoever I'm with as I'm presenting an apologetic.
I think you're terrible at it, man. I came on here to tell you, you're the meanest apologist I've ever seen, man.
No, I was going to say this though. Now, normally Braxton is considered the nice apologist, and that Adam is also the nice apologist. But I do want to say this, Adam, because
I'm scared.
You're for Mr. Winsome Nice Guy that is your normal reputation. You've brought out some claws lately, so we need to point that out. You do have claws.
Well, if need be.
Yep. He can get dirty, man. They were recent discussions with, and then later on BK's channel about Jabari. Yeah. If you want some high entertainment, go to BK's channel and listen to Adam and Vocab and BK and MJ and Phil and all those guys.
And welcome to those of you who came from those channels.
Yeah.
Subscribe to all the channels. Yeah.
So if someone said that to me, I think I would be as sensitive as I can and loving and all, but I would probably give apparently the right sort of answers. But I'm giving it from outside the context, and I'm wondering how important is it? How important is it that you have some of those shared issues in order to get the apologetic through?
Well, I think that I'll say two thof things to that. When it comes to the kinds of objections that we get against Christianity, whether it be atheistic or from other worldviews or whatever, one of the things that I've tried to do on my channel is help people to see that they're really the same kinds of objections that you would see anywhere else. You know what I'm saying? At the end of the day, they're going to come down to issues of morality, maybe packaged in cultural terms. You know what I'm saying? But ultimately, most of our apologetics are going to intersect with culture one way or the other. I mean, I can't tell you how many times, if you like listen to William Lane Craig or somebody like that, they're going to refer to I always get this title wrong, but the something archipelago, when they're talking about, the camps and stuff like that. I mean, our apologetics are laced with culture all the time. It's just a matter, I think, of being aware, that you're dealing with people who may not resonate with y'all know the book I'm talking about. I don't know why I mess up. The only part I can remember is Archipelago. I don't know why I mess up the rest of the title all the time. Something socialist and whatever. But the bottom line is, I think that we should always have.
I didn't know Jonathan Edwards has this awesome son that I didn't know about.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know.
I'm sorry. There's a conversations about jazz music, and then something about.
I don't know anything about jazz.
Something
music.
between. Yeah, I'm helping you out there.
Okay.
And then there's something. Sorry, Adam. I was thrown off by one of MJ's comments to Braxton about animal suffering on the 4th of July, and I'm
that was funny.
Animal suffering. Not to spit, cough, and all that.
That's funny, man.
BK Apologist, welcome.
Yeah, subscribe to his channel too, man. He's awesome. Yeah. He's got a lot of great content. But yeah, so to kind of give a concise answer to your question,
the gulag,
really. There we go. The gulag of archipelago. Like we hear that all the time. Just all the time when people are dealing with a moral argument, we're thinking about like Holocaust and that kind of stuff. Like we understand it. I'm just saying that we can expand our usage of examples and things like that to address maybe something that might hit more directly with somebody of a different perspective. Now, with that being said, I think that, and shout out to Doug Grotice, and I'm sure I probably mispronounced that, but he was on my channel about a year ago doing a he did the subject of lament, Christian lament. And there's a whole theology about lamenting and what that means from a biblical perspective. And I think that, the way that things are now, I'm going to go back to something I said earlier about how things tend to be politicized. And I think that when people are dealing with issues that they believe to be at a greater distance from themselves, culturally speaking, than maybe stuff that they're used to dealing with, it may seem like foreign, alien, or whatever. But I think one thing that brings, something that may be unfamiliar and nigh to us is that biblical element of lament. Like you don't have to subscribe to CRT to lament. You don't have to be a Democrat to lament or a conservative to lament. You don't have to, all of those things are extraneous to the biblical theology about lamenting. And by lamenting, I mean really engaging the humanity of somebody else and entering into that brokenness with them from a redemptive perspective, right? You can do that regardless of what your political leanings are, right? And I think in doing so, if we really exemplify what it means to lament, then we'll position ourselves in such a way that we can give space to maybe an argument that we want to bring. But I think that I think lamenting might be the missing piece in many of our interactions with folks. The other side is, I think, just being a good listener. You don't have to agree with everything that somebody says, but being a good listener can go a long way, and you can gather intel, if you will, kind of in a Greg Kokel sort of way. You can gather intel in terms of what might be the best route to take in one of those kinds of conversations. So that's kind of how I would approach it.
Well, I mean, the tradition of lamenting among God's people goes all the way back, not just to Jeremiah, but many of the prophets were lamenting, not because of what the other nations were doing, even though that was tragic as well, but they would also lament over Israel's actions. When they went, so it's not like this is a foreign concept for Christians to lament, even when we're discussing the atrocities done in God's name. But you can still, again, balance that with all of the good that people do in the name of Jesus. So, and I still would argue, on balance, Christianity has been the greatest force of good in the history of the world. And I don't think that can be reasonably disputed by anyone.
What would you guys say would be a good biblical definition of lamentation? To lament.
To lament? To have to have brokenheartedness over evil.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, that's good.
That's good.
That's good. And I think that you can do that in a way that ultimately points toward the cross. I think that's what we should always be angling toward the cross. And I think we so often miss opportunities when we skip that step. I think
Jesus lamented over. Jesus himself lamented over Jerusalem.
He did, yeah.
Yeah. How I longed to gather you under, like a hen gathers her chicks, but you were not willing. Jesus himself laments.
I'm going to let y'all tackle this one.
So,
I know we're kind of jumping into the middle of something.
Uh-oh.
But here's an apologetics question y'all can tackle. I was thinking you were done with that point, Jonathan.
Yeah, I just want to point out that, be like Jesus, kind of lament over things when God's people go wrong.
Yeah. Gustav Fredrickson says, I understood the claim that atheists can't say that something is morally wrong. When thinking about a human killing another human, you feel bad about it and conclude that it's wrong. I am not sure there has to be some infinite power saying it is wrong for us to consider it wrong.
Well, yeah, I don't think it's a matter of saying that atheists can't make moral claims or incapable. I think that what we want to get is, if you have this moral intuition that killing another human being is wrong, what best explains that moral intuition? What best explains why you ought not to? Even if you have a sense that you shouldn't kill somebody, why ought you not do that? I'm saying, like, what best explains that oughtness and things of that nature. So to get at the question, I don't know of any apologists who would say that atheists cannot make moral claims, or that if they do make moral claims that they're necessarily false. What we are saying, though, is if you kind of take a step back and look at all the different facets of the moral reality that we experience every day, that big ball of moral experience makes most sense on a biblical worldview as opposed to an atheistic one.
Jonathan, anything to add there?
Well, yeah, I was going to say, this goes back to the same thing that Christopher Hitchens couldn't ever understand, or maybe he did understand, but always pretended like he didn't. This is a question of ontology, not epistemology. In fact, Christians grant that atheists, certainly you can understand that things are morally wrong. Why do you have that understanding? What grounds that? Why is it objectively wrong and not just simply a preference that you have that people ought not kill each other, but maybe not a preference other people have that they should have? Why do you think that they should have that same preference? It can't merely be because, if they don't want to die and I don't want to die, so we don't kill each other. How's that worked out in human history? It hasn't. Mm-hmm. So what is, it's not, can you not figure out what's moral and what's not moral and make right moral judgments? That's not the question. The question is about what grounds it as actually being objectively wrong, as opposed to spewing opinions about what you would prefer. That's what it's about.
There's some
There it
good
is.
Pritchett ranting for y'all. Some of y'all come just for that. There you go. There's a whole bucket full.
There it
Hey, real
is.
quick, Jeremy Scott Despain says, Proverbs 18:13, he that answereth the matter before he heareth it, it is folly and shame unto him. And Jeremy Scott Despain has a new Christian Apologetics YouTube channel. I always like to think about the people that helped me out when I was first getting started, and I like to try to help other people out. But this guy, I met him in Seattle, Washington at the Rethinking Hell Conference in November, and he was just a super cool guy. He's a pastor. He has a channel, and Godless Engineer responded to one of his videos. Well, tomorrow morning, I'm going to release a video response that Jeremy and I did together responding to Godless Engineer. So y'all want to, check out his channel and tomorrow watch that video. But sorry, guys, didn't mean to interrupt your flow. Oh, hey, guess what, guys? Mike Winger. Thank you for the super chat, Mike.
Right. The co-nicest apologist alive.
That's
next to Braxton. You know what I'm saying? Right.
Oh man.
No, not
the atheists have turned on me, Adam. They don't think I'm nice anymore.
They don't.
Oh, is that right? Oh,
yeah,
man.
I'm a snake oil salesman.
Yeah, and Adam, they're gonna stop thinking you're nice if you keep going after Jabari the way you are.
Oh man, yeah, it was pretty merciless the other night, man. But I'm pretty nice when people engage with me. But if I feel like if atheists or whatever they are, non-believers bullying other Christians, that's when I got to put the gloves on. That's what that is.
Well, hold on. Mike's got a super chat. He says, you guys should all keep watching Trinity Radio, even though I'm going live in 10 minutes. ... Yeah,
but
even
I wouldn't
though
even do that.
I'm going live in 10 minutes.
Right. Yeah, see, not even I would do that. I'm going to check out here in a few minutes. I'm going to be watching Mike Winger with the closed caption on. Yeah, I'm like, what's
that's hilarious.
All right.
Man.
You got
so
anything else?
Maybe Mike Winger is not the nicest man. He's trying to undermine your show. So maybe he's lost a couple of nice points there. Yeah.
Kevin O'Connor says, "Have y'all drank enough water today? Hydration is so important."
Yes,
I'm sure I have not. I'm sure I haven't.
Probably not. Yeah.
I'm sure Braxton has not.
Probably
I don't know about Adam, but of course,
no, I definitely haven't. I'm certain. I probably sweated out whatever I've drunk within the last 20 minutes here doing this show.
Hey guys. Fun fact, Adam Coleman has a gaming channel, Tru-ID Gaming. You should ask him about it and also put that link in your description.
Nate 2D2. Shout out to Nate, man. That's my guy, Nate.
That sounds like a new insult or something. Like put that in your pipe and smoke it. Put that in your description.
Wait, but is that true?
Right. It is true. Actually, I've been kind of lazy with it. I do have a game streaming channel, Tru-ID Gaming, that I've been slacking on. I'm actually about to get back on it. Mostly NBA. Well, actually, I do like Madden, but I've been playing NBA. Yeah. I mean, I Call of Duty, what people do in their own time is their own time. I just didn't feel like spending hours defending while I'm playing Call of Duty online. So I'm like, let me keep it safe.
You're not going to defend it. Just don't answer those questions.
Right.
Just if people ask, just don't acknowledge those questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, but
he's going to try to suck you into this PUBG thing with Chris Date. Don't fall for it.
He's too spiritual. He's trying to say he has a problem killing people online.
I kind of do, but yeah, it's just I haven't been on it like I wanted to because I've been promoting the book and writing some new stuff, so I just haven't been able to get back on there. But I plan on getting back on it.
Does anybody have any more questions? We got Adam Coleman in the house. This is your time. Mike Winger's even asking questions, kind of.
Yeah.
Oh, is he? Okay, what's he got? Yeah, I'm with it.
Well, no, he just made a statement, really.
He was talking about what games. Well, obviously, what, Madden?
We already answered that.
Yeah.
NBA, Madden.
Yeah, NBA 2K, kind of sports stuff. Yeah, I felt like it's
dude games.
Yeah,
right,
games.
Right. I mean, honestly, I kind of felt like it was in poor taste to have with some channel called Tru-ID. ID stands for the Imago Dei. I kind of felt like it was in poor taste to have a channel based around the Imago Dei where I'm like shooting people virtually. So I was like, that's probably not a good idea.
You're killing them because they're not real, and so they're a false Imago.
Yeah, I'm
Dei.
with this Phil Fox here. He's like, nah. I run around. Wait, what did Phil Fox say? Nah, I be killing folks online for you. Doing it right. You and Braxton, man, y'all are violent.
Well, guys, there aren't too many questions today. So I'll tell you, and we'll take questions on anything. But I'll tell you what, if I don't see some questions pop up just in the next few moments, then we'll just try to wind it down, and people can watch Mike Winger because he was nice to us. So, Adam, I feel like you didn't get to say all you wanted to say. So what's
Okay,
on
cool.
your heart, brother? Bear it.
Okay, that's cool. That's cool. Well, I do have quite a bit to say actually, on quite a few things, but maybe that's part of the problem. I get kind of scattered with the kind of stuff that I want to talk about. But yeah, kind of sticking with the topic of Black atheism, I want to encourage people to explore different ways. And this is something that I really got from Jonathan Pritchett, but explore different ways that we can apply apologetics, right? I mean, there is the new atheism out there that we do need to, I guess, I don't know if it's like the new atheism. I don't know what it is now, new atheism 3.0, whatever they're on. But there is that aspect that we need to address. But I would encourage people, there's various different ways that you can apply the kinds of stuff that we study all the time in various different contexts. One of my favorite projects, quite frankly, is reclaiming some African and African-American authors, particularly Christian authors, and kind of refurbishing their works and employing them in apologetics arguments. So like Frederick Douglass, for example, gives an argument from reason that he connects with morality. I'm working on a project in regard to that. In the book, in the chapter that I wrote on Black atheism, there's actually a pretty cool philosopher from Ethiopia back in the 17th century named Zera Yacob, who made a cosmological argument that I don't think anybody has ever actually utilized his work in apologetics until now. So kind of reclaiming some of his work and things like that. Awesome. There's all sorts of, it's actually pretty cool. I'm going to kind of throw my cards out there. I actually stumbled across them on Wikipedia, which is terrible. Wow. But I was just searching around for African philosophy. Just because I'm interested in it, and there was a Wikipedia article about Zera Yacob where they just have this one line that apparently he made a cosmological argument, and so I tracked it down in the Blackwell Companion, more writings about him, and eventually I came across a work that was compiled of his thoughts called the Hatatta, that was written in the late 17th century. Indeed, in the third chapter of the Hatatta, he does make a cosmological argument. And so in my chapter for on Black atheism, I incorporated that. And what's really cool about it is that he makes an argument that's kind of like a three-part argument where he incorporates not only there being a need for a first cause, but also a first cause that can account for order and rationality in the universe. And so he kind of has this
combination of a cosmological and a teleological argument.
Oh yeah, very much so, because most cosmological arguments characteristically are going to have those two stages where you're making a case for some sort of fundamental cause or aspect of reality, and then you're going to go into what's it like. And so he kind of merges those two in like the series of questions that he kind of makes an argument that the best account for rationality, order in the world. He would include things like biological order, as well as it being that first cause. He kind of molds them all together in an argument that he makes for God's existence. So it's pretty fascinating stuff. Pretty fascinating.
Now that's really interesting, because you could probably also come across some great thinkers who maybe didn't even think about what they were saying as apologetic in nature, but in our context, it would be. So you can find all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, perfect example. So when it comes to there's a guy named Martin Delaney, for example. This is a guy who's an escaped enslaved person. He actually ended up fighting in the Civil War. He was an abolitionist. He worked hand in hand with Frederick Douglass and some of their publications. And he wrote a book, and I want to say it was in, maybe probably mid 1850s. He wrote a book about how can African enslaved persons, like, how would it be, how are they going to build a community once slavery is over? Basically, that was kind of his whole aim. And if you look at his writing, he's basing it on the biblical worldview. He talks about how you have to have at the base layer of your community these realities, these moral realities that can only be found in God. And it's really kind of interesting where he talks about what he refers to as spiritual laws, but ultimately, in the same sense that we would make an argument that God is the foundation of morality, that's essentially the argument that he was making back in like the 1800s. And so that gives us an occasion to form some moral arguments that I think really hit well when you're dealing with the African American context. So let me clarify that a bit to kind of make some sense of it. generally speaking, I think that you have two, broad types of arguments that really matter in the African American context. I'm actually going to borrow from Alvin Plantinga a little bit. You have like your de jure objections, and you have your de facto objections. De facto, as in, Christianity is in fact, wrong in some sense or another, like Jesus didn't exist, or something like that. But then you have your de jure objections. Now, in Plantinga's work, the de jure objections that he deals with have to do with like, the rationality of or justification for Christianity and so forth. Whereas in the African American context, I think that you have ideas like Christianity is the white man's religion, or it's, things like that. Those are kind of de jure objections. It's not so much about whether or not Christianity is true, but it's the sense that there's some sort of ethnic betrayal or moral problem with Christianity for which it should be rejected. And I think that what happens is, or what I found rather, is that when you employ African American or African philosophers and couple that with, the kinds of arguments that we have at our disposal already, then you can actually kind of thread the a response that deals with both the jure and the de facto objection in ways that seem to be pretty powerful. So when I use a Martin Delany and incorporate him into formulating the moral argument, I've seen that be pretty solid.
Well, I think that's awesome. I would like to know the answer to this question from both of you, Kirk or Picard.
Kirk.
Oh, Kirk. Yeah, you got to go Kirk.
I'll go.
I was going to say on that, there was a debate, I guess it was a couple years ago now, and I cannot remember the name of the participants, but it was on that very question, is Christianity a white man's religion? And I don't remember the scholar's name, but it was a Christian scholar debated. I don't think he was, the person he debated was a scholar, but I cannot remember the name. So if somebody remembers that debate, MJ or somebody, put that.
Was that, you talking about Vince Bantu versus Jabari? Is that
Bantu? Yes, thank you.
That was definitely in Philly.
That debate,
I was there.
Yeah, that debate was a bloodbath.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, and see,
Fantastic.
That's another thing. That's another example of. I think that when somebody hears that is Christianity the white man's religion, you kind of bristle at it, like, oh man, it's this racial stuff again. But really, what you're hearing is a de jure objection against Christianity. That's what that is. There's this notion that there's this ethnic betrayal about being Black and Christian. So it's kind of tied to some sort of moral component, and people are saying that on that basis, Christianity should be rejected. And so again, this kind of goes back to my overall project of trying to help people to see that when you're dealing with these objections in the African American context, it's not really something that's foreign to what you're already seeing. It's just a matter of kind of knowing what you're looking at when you see it.
That's really helpful.
And that question and the debate really brings this out. If you want to learn some church history, that's where history becomes super important again, because I learned things I completely had no idea about listening to Bantu talk. It just,
oh man, yeah,
it was
Bantu's a beast.
It was just stunning to just watch him pick that whole question to pieces. I mean, and you'll learn some stuff, and that's, again, history is just so important when you're doing apologetics.
Yeah, I'm really passionate about what you just said. I really believe that the church today needs to make it a point to reclaim our multi-ethnic, transcultural heritage. You know what I'm saying? That, if you look at what God has done throughout the last couple millennia, just in church history, I mean, we leave so much out of our picture of what church history looks like. You know what I'm saying? Like, to your point, when we think about like somebody like Augustine, like we know that Augustine, his mother was likely an indigenous African. Her name was Monica, and based upon the name in that region, we know that she was probably a Berber, and things like that. Those things may not matter to some, but they matter a lot, when you're in my context. When somebody's trying to tell you that Christians, or the Africans just encountered Christianity during slavery, and you can point out how no, actually, before you get out of the first century, you already see Christianity in Egypt. In the second century, you already have it in North Africa. You already have it in Ethiopia before the end of the third or fourth century. Christian, matter of fact, the area called Sudan was referred to as Christian Nubia because in about 450 AD to about the 14th century, it was a Christian nation. That's, you're talking about a Christian nation on the continent of Africa for about 1,000 years, with all of that being before the transatlantic slave trade. All of those things really matter. As a matter of fact, I just dropped a video a couple months ago on my channel, how we have textual evidence of there being Christians in West Africa prior to the transatlantic slave trade. So all of these things really matter when somebody's confronting you with this notion that Christianity is the white man's religion. It's like, no, the gospel it transcends culture. It transcends any particular ethnic group. And we need to, I think, reclaim that. so we can really undermine these de jure objections that I was talking about.
That's good. Hey, I have a question. What would the world look like if there was no God? I think this is a question like you say that you believe in God because of these facts about the nature of reality. How would it be different if there were no God? My answer to that question is
it wouldn't exist.
Have a universe.
Yeah, right. It was
So
like
that's
what was
pretty
it? What Rockets? Yeah, I think it wouldn't exist if there were no God. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay, but there's more. Is it acceptable to put pineapple on a pizza, Adam?
Yes, absolutely.
Jonathan?
I am a pineapple pizza guy.
No, and I like pineapple. I like pizza. Leave the pineapple off the
I
pizza.
agree.
Adam's absolutely wrong about this. Don't listen to Adam.
Pineapple and pepperoni. Just trust me on that. Pineapple and pepperoni on the pizza. It'll be the best decision you ever made, other than coming to Christ. And I guess if you're married, other than your
who can
your
turn
spouse.
that down, man?
Sorry, honey. This is just better than our wedding day.
Okay, computer theist says, does denying inerrancy mean that you are denying a core doctrine of the Christian faith and thus becoming a progressive Christian? 2 question marks.
No.
Adam?
I mean, I wouldn't say necessarily. I mean, I guess maybe you're on your way to becoming a progressive Christian. I mean, but yeah, I'm not sure about that. Now, for clarity, I don't deny inerrancy. Let me just make that clear. But I'm not sure that would necessarily put you in that camp. I mean,
I'd say I'd call that a warning sign. My ears perk up. Like what?
Yeah.
You know, but it doesn't mean you're necessarily. I agree with. We all agree there. Yeah. Let's see. Someone's taking it serious and says, "Why do people put virtue or moral value on how people take their coffee or whether or not they like pizza or pineapple on pizza?" Oh, here we go. When will Adam Coleman become a professor at Trinity?
Oh, wow. Hey, that's. Well, I would like to know as well.
We were all waiting for him to earn a doctorate.
Oh, okay.
Or
there you have it.
Or be like Chris Tate and come teach biblical Greek and biblical Hebrew.
Oh, wait, I don't know if I can help you there.
So get your doctorate.
Yeah, I'll have to get that doctorate straight. Yeah.
Hey,
no,
guys,
I mean, interestingly enough, y'all be praying for me. I really, my prayer is that I would like to go full-time ministry, and a component of that, I do want to teach at the university level. So actually, I am pursuing my doctorate. So y'all be praying for me on that score.
We will do that, Adam.
I pray for you
how
all
do
the
you
time,
engage
man.
with people that are into conspiracy theories? I know some people lean on conspiracies and not Christ. I know a few that are Christian. Thanks. I appreciate all the work you do. So
man, that's really interesting.
Someone, Adam, and they get all these wacky conspiracy theories, or that seem wacky, and you're trying to get Jesus into them, but you got to deal with all this stuff.
You know what? I'm gonna be honest with you. That can be that can be really tough. Now let me start with the African American context, because I'm assuming that might be where he's going with it. But because here's the hard part. There is an underlying kind of anti-establishment vibe, if you will. You know what I'm saying? That I think is present in the African American community, because on the one hand, when you historically, I mean, the Tuskegee trials happened. Like the Tuskegee experiments really did happen. It really is the case that you have COINTELPRO in the 60s and 70s weaponizing, if you will, the FBI against individuals like Martin Luther King and some of these other key figures. I mean, that stuff really happened. And at the time, it may have seemed conspiracy-ish, but looking back on it, it's like, oh, snap, like there really was a conspiracy. And we live in a fallen world. In a fallen world, people, whether they be of a governmental sort and whatever, they tag team and engage in sin together. So sometimes you have people teaming up to do really evil things. So I think that you have the stage set there for there to be this kind of ever-present suspicion of the powers that be. With that being said, I think what we want to do is we want to challenge people to follow the evidence where it leads, and sometimes you have to slow down and even talk with people about what does it mean for you to have solid evidence. A video on YouTube. I mean, I know we're on YouTube right now, but a video about some conspiracy on YouTube ought not to sway you, but so much, when it comes to following some conspiracy. You shouldn't be wearing the tinfoil hat based off of a 30-minute YouTube video. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
helping people to identify what constitutes solid arguments and evidence before you even address the conspiracy. I think that has a great payoff, dealing with those critical thinkings. And then once you kind of lay that groundwork, then maybe you can engage the conspiracy itself more directly. And I think probably see more fruit from it.
Well, we're getting questions now, guys. So I'm sorry
Okay,
to keep
cool.
you, Adam, if you're in a rush.
No, I'm good, man. I'm not. I'm good.
All right. How do you respond to someone that is, Jonathan, you can weigh in on this. How do you respond to someone that is questioning why a loving God would torture / kill his son, particularly when coming from a background with abuse and legalism? Guys?
Oh, that's a great question.
Jonathan, any thoughts?
Well,
Adam?
Well, I think that you have to, first of all, I would kind of take it back to what we were talking about earlier. I mean, I wouldn't recommend launching into some deep theological, philosophical answer before you take the time to maybe lament with that person. If that person has really experienced those things, then you at least want to take time to acknowledge that and maybe preface.
Yeah. Oh, you're saying like if they've experienced abuse and legalism.
Yeah, if you're dealing with that person who's experienced those things, then you do want to kind of take time to acknowledge that before you launch into giving a response. Because if you don't, then it can seem as though you're being dismissive or intellectualizing something that's more experiential for that person. With that being said, I do think that we can take into account the players involved. Obviously, a God who is morally perfect, knows all things, and requires justice, one way or the other. Is in a very different position than a flawed, finite, wicked, human being, right? So I think you kind of have to explore the actors involved in both of those scenarios before you can really cash out how it is the case that a loving, all-knowing God can indeed, for the sake of us, all of us, require justice at the expense of the eternal Son. But I think that if you don't have a clear view of those involved, then I'll put it this way: once you have a clear view of those involved, then you can see a divide between the two different scenarios. That I think that's the key to maybe helping the person navigate that.
Yeah, that's really actually helpful. It's practical advice. Yeah, if we actually hear what kind of abuse, what kind of legalism was that background, we can see, well, no, there's some serious differences between what you experienced and what we're talking about with the gospel message.
Yeah, well, first we have to remember what Jesus said, I lay down my life so that I may take it up again. Right? So there's that. It was, and no matter how you take Isaiah 53 and it pleased the Lord to crush him or whatever, you have to understand what in what sense. Now we know that it was at the hands of Pilate and Herod and the Gentiles and the people of Israel, right? They're the ones who carried out the thing, right? Jesus willingly went through that death. And what does God say? Or what does Paul say about what God did? Paul doesn't say that God condemned Jesus. Paul says that God condemns sin in the body of Jesus, right? In Romans 8, in the flesh of Jesus, actually. So I agree with Adam that you want to limit that if they're coming from that background where they've dealt with that. But I would want to disassociate that from what actually happened with Jesus and clarify what actually happened at the cross and how that what happened at the cross is to bring restoration to things that he had or she had done that was wicked to them in the past, and bring healing to that. And it's not that there's that God is the cosmic child abuser, because that's not the best way to characterize it. And I do affirm penal substitutionary atonement, but I am also sympathetic to the people who will present the worst version of it to where that's what you think happened on the cross when there's actually no biblical evidence that that's what happened on the cross, right?
Yeah. And let me come back on that too. I want to say this. I think that whether it be the scenario that she described, we have the legalistic and kind of abusive situation, or we've heard of people struggling with the concept of God being their father when maybe their dad wasn't there, or just they had a bad father or something like that. I think maybe one thing we do have to be careful of is just kind of coming alongside people and walking them through what the Bible actually says about God and what God has done, so that they can exegete the scriptures rather than reading the scriptures through the lens of their trauma. I think it's really easy to do. It's really easy to kind of read your trauma into the text, if you will, particularly if you may not be trained in terms of how to exegete the text. But I think that we kind of want to come alongside people and help them to, see what the Bible actually says, not so much how their trauma interpreting the Bible for them, if you will.
Well, we're going to do 3 more questions, if that's okay. And so I've already
Cool.
got them. The first question is, what are some good books on theology for a novice who thinks they have a decent base but likes to learn more? Now, that's a question that we get somewhat regularly, but today we've got Adam Coleman on, who might recommend some different books. One book you definitely need to get, whether it pertains specifically to what you're thinking of or not out there, Yin-Su, I hope I said that right, is Adam Coleman's new book.
Yeah, that might be helpful.
Boom.
Right, there you go.
That's some cool graphic design, I'll say that.
Oh man, yeah, it's great, right? I mean, that's worth the price of admission right there.
I love it. It looks good on a bookshelf.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
So what are some good books on theology for a novice?
Somebody, he says he's got a kind of a base, but he needs to go deeper.
The Bible.
The Bible. Yeah.
I'm gonna be like super. I'm gonna defer to
James Bible.
Only the King James only. I'm actually gonna defer to Jonathan Pritchard because he might have a better lay of the land, being the dean that he is. I don't know what actually is considered to be introductory level versus some of the stronger stuff.
Yeah, I think the best and probably the only theology book you really need to have on your shelf if you want like a good
the only theology book you need.
Yeah,
that's an endorsement, right?
Yeah,
there.
I mean Thomas Oden's Classic Christianity is systematic and historical theology wrapped into that book, right? Gives you the consensus of what everyone, Protestant, Catholic, Orthodox, voices from 2,000 years of church history, where they all agree on all the major doctrines of that you would find in a normal systematic theology book. So Classic Christianity by Thomas Oden. And I think that is probably the most outstanding theology book ever to be written. It's a gift to the church. It's basically the only one that you ever need if you just want classic Christianity. If you want particular...
Dang dog, you got a t-shirt for that book?
There it is, man. Right.
But should. But that's the best one ever. And if you want more...
He's got a tat. He's got a tat of the book on his chest or on his stomach.
It's arched over his navel.
Now, if you want, now, if you want something from the Reformed tradition, people are going to say Burkhoff, but I'm going to say Shed, Dogmatic Theology, if you want a Reformed tradition. If you want a general evangelical tradition, I want to say James Leo Garrett's 2 volumes would be a good one. But if you just want one solid, this is what Christians have believed for 2,000 years, everyone agrees with it, nobody has a problem with it, and you'll get quotes from church fathers all the way up to the 19th, 20th century, just get Classic Christianity by Thomas Oden.
Dr. Adam Harwood, I remember on one occasion at a symposium or something that we were at, laughed at you for saying Shed because it was so old.
Right, but this is the thing. Name one Wayne Grudem's Systematic Theology is better than Shed.
That's the one that gets all the attention.
Erickson's book, no. Robert Raymond's New Systematic Theology from a Calvinist is better than Shed. No, a Calvinist has not written a better systematic theology book since Dogmatic Theology.
Look how excited he is.
Do better, Calvinist. Write a better one, and I'll write a better one.
Oldie but a goodie, man. There you go.
Yeah.
All right.
This is the thing. Why does it have to be new to be good? In fact, books have gotten worse in the last 50 years than they used to be.
Doesn't have to be new.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. And I would say Adam Harwood's Systematic Theology, but it hasn't come out yet.
Yeah.
If you want a good Baptist
I'm glad that I deferred to Pritchard. Y'all got a way more fiery answer than I would have given. So I'm glad I deferred.
No, I'm serious. Well,
it's the bucket of chum.
Yeah, Adam Harwood did laugh at me. I was like, okay, well, name one Calvinist systematic theology book better than Shed's. And don't give me this Bapto Calvinist. No, that's not real Calvinism. Give me Reformed Baptist.
You're my
Don't
guy.
give me John
I
MacArthur's
believe
new
you.
systematic.
You're my
snap.
guy. If you
Yeah.
tell me that's the book, then
That's the book. It's awesome. book.
Shots fired, man. All right, I
Yeah.
like it. Spicing it up.
Finding Truth wants to know.
Get that Wayne Grudem systematic theology drivel out of here. Go read Shed.
Finding Truth, who we love so much here, he wants to know if this works for Hispanics. He says, does Adam think that some of the objections used in the African-American context can be used in the Hispanic context as well, with a twist, the conquistadors, like native peoples killed, those sorts of things?
Oh, yeah. Oh, very much so. And so actually, what we are seeing is that in the African-American context, there's this idea that you kind of give it in a nutshell. There's this notion that during the transatlantic slave trade, you have this disruption of identity. And today what we need to do is cast off anything that's European and take on, that which is consistent with our African selves. And in the context of that, people are saying that Christianity is on the wrong side of the ledger. It's on the European side, therefore we need to get rid of it. We're seeing the same kinds of things in the Native American context. Phil Fox is in the chat. He can attest to that, as well as the Hispanic context as well. Now my understanding is that when you're talking about actual South America, that tends to be levied against Catholicism, which obviously is huge down there, and so they're kind of catching the brunt of it. But absolutely, in my experience, we were seeing kind of mirror images of those kind of arguments, not only in the African American context, but also amongst Hispanics and Native Americans as well. Mm-hmm.
So somebody needs to write a volume similar to what you've done, maybe for that context.
Well, funny you should say that. Actually, when I first started the Tru-ID podcast, I was originally, before then, I was going to write a book about these kinds of things. And as I was praying about it, and I was actually in Bible study, kind of just thinking about the Imago Dei, and I felt like, God has much more to say than obviously just to the African American context, and that I needed to reach out to people who are in the Hispanic or Native American context, who are encountering those kind of things, and use my podcast to give them a voice as well, because they can speak much more to those things than I could. Obviously, I've studied a great deal about slavery and just kind of the protracted forms, this period of oppression that we've seen here in the American, just Western world. But when it comes to like treaties being broken between American and Native Americans and how that's reflected on the church and things like that, I'm not as well versed in that. But I do have people like my brother Phil Fox who can speak to that and address those concerns in detail.
It's funny you say that, because Miss Mutola just said, we're answering questions here. Winger is taking questions. Sean McDowell's taking questions all at the same time. Maybe it's Sunday already, but that's the thing. That's the thing. There are people here that I think hopefully are benefiting from the answers that you guys are giving. And same with Winger, same with McDowell. It's and then with the different contexts, Phil Fox, it's like God's got the kingdom, and he's got people on the job in all aspects of the kingdom. One of the things we were saying, like you were talking about how you'd like to see it, us be a multi-ethnic, multicultural kingdom around the world. And, that's one of the things we call here at Trinity. We actually have a scholarship that we call the City of God Scholarship. And the reason we call it that is because Augustine, City of God, he had written after Rome had fallen after 800 years of uninterrupted power. And now they were having to face the question. Many of the people were wondering, well, this is because of our embrace of Christianity. If we hadn't embraced Christianity, this wouldn't have happened. And Augustine's writing an apologetic to say, no, this city didn't fall because of Christianity. This city fell for the same reason that all man-made cities fall, ultimately, is because they're man-made cities. But there is a city that will never fall. In fact, it's the city of God. And because it doesn't have borders, there's no language, there's no skin tone. And if you stamp it out in one place, it springs up tenfold somewhere else. And so I've often said I want our school to be the academic city of God. We want people of all tongues, tribes, nations, all around the world. And Trinity doesn't really have a location if you stamp it out. This is actually true. If this building was struck with a meteor or something, we could still do what we're doing online at home. And
as long as we're not here when it happens.
Yeah, as long as we're not here when it happens.
Or at least as long as I'm not here when it happens.
We'll be dead, but somebody
will. One of you guys has to survive. At least one of you has to survive.
No, just me. It would have to be me.
You can flip a coin, and see what it is. But no, what's very interesting that you bring up Augustine is that in regard to City of God, a key piece of his argumentation is looking through history from a biblical worldview, if you will, and I think, much of what we're trying to do.
The book is like a
the same
history
thing.
of the world to that point in time.
It is. It exactly. And so when you think about, if you're encountering that black atheist, or maybe, whatever group they subscribe to, we are looking at history through very different lenses. So I think sometimes it helps to show, where their lens has some smudges on it, by which they can't see things quite clearly. Whereas the biblical world, you can make sense of what we're seeing, in history. Yeah.
Amen. All right.
Yeah, and all of you anti-Calvi provisionists, whatever you're calling yourself, quit picking on Augustine. You need to read Augustine. Quit accusing him of destroying Western Christianity, because he's awesome. Go read him. Quit making him.
Me and Adam are over here calling him Augustine. And if you keep this Augustine mess up,
Augustine.
it's gonna.
Well, I mean, but seriously though, Augustine.
Yeah.
The city
I'm from
Augustine.
Florida, man. I used to live
right.
near St.
I
Augustine.
hear you. I understand. Look, quit making him the book. I know that he got some things wrong, but still, don't be dumping on that guy.
He's a great mind, man. Yeah,
ton of brilliant stuff, and he was right for 3/4 of his career. So
Augustine
there you
versus
go.
Shed.
Oh, who wins in a cage match?
Like I said, that's no contest. The older I go with, older is always better than newer.
Augustine.
There we go. Augustine wins, man.
You wouldn't. That would be a blow to your credit if you didn't give that to Augustine. All right, here's the last thing.
One of those two gentlemen is considered the part of the canon of the Western world, and one of those is a Presbyterian.
Yeah.
No, Calvin's part of it, so that would be tough, Calvin.
Now, this is a personal question about something that maybe you know about.
There would be no Calvin without Augustine, though, so you still got to go with Augustine.
So you may need to give us some context for this, Adam, if you know what they're talking about.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Adrian Jones says, Adam, can you debunk the whole God created evil and Satan works for God statement that came up in the debate? You were doing it, but then got cut off.
Right. Well, actually, I'm going to do a whole video on it, but so to give some context, I was on a right.
No, we're not taking content from his channel. Give the preview.
No, he's close, man.
I give the preview.
Like,
I got
more than 10,000 subs already. We got to start playing ball here.
Yeah.
We're about to get trounced by Adam.
Oh no, not at all, man. I appreciate y'all. So I was part of a dialogue / ambush debate kind of a thing on another channel, Another TV, about a week ago, and the host, who I think was supposed to have been kind of impartial, who actually ended up just lobbing all kinds of objections in Christianity against me and Vocab Malone. So he clearly had his slant. And among the things that he brought up was the scripture in Isaiah 45:7. And I think another one was Amos 6:3, but Isaiah 45:7, we get it all the time.
In
that,
the King
I, the
James
Lord
version.
In the King James, exactly. I create light and darkness. I create good and evil. And so I was explaining that, the explanation that I gave the other day is context matters, right? If somebody were to, now actually this might not even be a legit argument since he got put out of the playoffs, but if I were having a conversation with Jonathan Pritchett and I said something like LeBron James, if he wins 3 more championships, LeBron James is the greatest of all time. And if Braxton walks into the room as I'm saying LeBron James is the greatest of all time, and he might break in and say, well, no, man, it was, Michael Jordan for this, that, and the third reason. It can't be LeBron James, and you're crazy. Well, I can interrupt him and say, hey, man, you didn't hear the whole context of what I said. You didn't hear the whole sentence, right? And so I used that example the other day to say that context really matters. And so likewise, when it comes to Isaiah 45:7, the context of that passage is that God is talking about how he deals with nations. Indeed, if you're obviously Israel was in covenant with him, and if you're doing what you need to do, then hey, God's bringing about blessings and so forth. But when you do have nations, whether it be Israel or otherwise, that are out of step with God's moral nature, breaking his laws and so forth, then God does indeed bring calamity. He brings about negative results. Now, if you want to get super deep with it and say by bringing it about, it means that he allows, or however you want to cash that out. Bad things happen when you step outside, when you're on the wrong side of God's moral nature. We'll just put it that way. It allows for calamity. So in the passage that the King James renders, that he creates evil, it's really talking about the calamity that results from God's judgment. With that being said, Actually, I did appeal to St. Augustine. I don't know if people caught it, but since we were just talking about Augustine a second ago, Augustine does advance like this kind of Neoplatonist idea, wherein evil in itself doesn't necessarily exist. It's just evil exists as a privation of good. In the same sense that cold is a privation of heat, or darkness is a privation of light. Evil in of itself doesn't have its own ontology, if you will. It exists as a privation. So, in so much as that's the case, evil has never been, God did not create evil. You know what I'm saying? He created things in a state of goodness, and evil is a privation of that. And in so much as that's the case, evil exists.
And dependent upon the goodness in order for the distinguished to be made in the first place.
Right.
To make the distinction. And that goes to answer the other question about beauty and ugly. No, ugly doesn't contradict the argument from beauty or balance it out.
Oh, you jumping into the
yeah, because
I answered it.
Yeah, I was just saying, the
is the argument from beauty question? Is that what we are?
Yeah,
he saw how I answered a question, and now he wants to answer it with my answer so that he sounds smart.
Oh, I didn't know. I didn't see your answer. I'm just saying.
Interestingly enough,
exactly into what Adam was saying.
Yeah.
For not everyone reads the chat. Okay, some people enjoy looking at the screen or whatever, or listen on the audio.
Yeah.
And so what I'm saying is, similarly to the argument, or evil being the privation of good, the beauty and ugliness, same thing.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
right. I was going to say,
someone had asked in the chat for the audience. Someone had asked in the chat, well, if there's an argument from beauty, doesn't the fact that ugly things exist demonstrate that this beauty ugly, that's nonsense?
No, it demonstrates that it's required. No. By what, without beauty, you wouldn't know that ugly was distinct from that and deviated from it, or private.
Yeah, I was going to say, I up until fairly recently, I was kind of skeptical of the argument from beauty, man. But looking into it a little further, I think it's actually pretty powerful. I mean, you do have beauty itself exists independent of the items that we would identify as beautiful, and I think that's pretty interesting.
Beauty is in the eye of the beholder is one of the most wicked lies that ever come out of hell.
Yeah.
And ever since people stopped believing in objective beauty, you know what went next? Objective goodness. And you know what went after that? Objective truth. And it all because even well-meaning Christians started saying dumb stuff like, yeah, we agree, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. And you wonder why people don't even affirm objective truth or goodness anymore. The transcendentals matter. So
and I kind of wonder too. Like I'm thinking about obviously it's an unfortunate truth that pornography and the sex trade are obviously multi-billion whatever dollar industries, and I kind of find it interesting that if you kind of take beauty out of the hands of God, if you will, and just kind of make it a man-centered kind of thing, then it becomes not only beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but also in the control of the beholder. And you can just kind of do with it, what you want, and then and so much that's the case that you have this intersection between morality and beauty. Whereas if you, to your point, Pritchett, if you rightly situate it as a transcendent thing that is grounded in God, then I think that kind of makes more sense of why things like pornography are wrong. Or maybe just adds another layer to it, if you will.
All right, last question of the day. This is a bonus because I said the last question was the last question.
Well, one
Erickson versus Grudem for systematic theologies.
Odin, don't get either one of those systematic theologies.
So you say it's a false dichotomy? It's a
why would you get either one? They're both mediocre, quasi, diet Calvinist, Baptistish, whatever.
You said diet Calvinist? Is that right?
Diet
like Calvinism light?
Yeah, that's what they are. That's what Grudem and Erickson both are. They're Baptist-ish. They're not really. I mean, Erickson's Baptist, Grudem's Baptist-ish, but they're both diet Calvinist, mediocre systematic theologies. Why bother with either one of them? There's so much better out there.
Man, you're on a roll today, man. You got easy spin apologetics. You got diet Calvinism, Calvinism light. Man, you're on a roll, bro.
We need to make T-shirts out of some of these things. We already have, by the way. We already have #BeEvangelical for those people that are ex-evangelical.
You never made the Christians do it better T-shirt, though.
No, I never.
There's a lot of us are still a little bit bitter about that one. We'd wear it.
Jonathan, the Living Lexicon, Pritchett.
Yeah.
Well, hey, I want to say one thing. Speaking of shirts, as we wrap this up, did anyone notice my Soteriology 101 shirt here today? I'm
Oh, there
rocking
it
Wayne
is.
Flowers gear.
Yeah.
Anyway,
No
Adam,
one noticed.
this has been awesome, man. And everybody needs to go
Thank
check
you,
out the
thank you.
book. And you need to definitely subscribe to Adam Coleman's channel. And it's different. You're going to get a different take sometime. I mean, there's going to be overlap. We're going to say a lot of the same things, but
Sure.
you need to be well-rounded. And as we said, God has people on the job, regardless of the nation, the language, the color, whatever. God's got people on the job, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to be as aware of these differences and the best ways to approach people and those sorts of things. So it's been really great having you on, Adam, and we
Thank you,
really
man.
consider you a friend of the channel. And if we were all a part of a if we were a part of a podcast group beyond people related to Trinity, I'd want you in it.
Yeah.
And
Hey, all right,
so
man.
We'll see. And hey, maybe we'll have you at Trinity. Jonathan seemed to get excited at that.
I have my
I would
list,
love it, man.
And I have a list, and so far I'm checking names off as we go. So we're
Man,
All right, guys.
so I gotta go burn my I Hate Arkansas shirt. So I can
man.
so I can stay on that list, man. I can make a note of that.
Oh man.
yeah. I mean that's
Well, I'll tell you what, guys. This has been awesome. I love y'all,
Yeah.
and
Hey,
for the rest of you out there,
well. Thanks for liking us, even though he says I'm a Calvinist and you guys rock.
praise the Lord.
Jesus Garcia, or maybe it's
Amen.
Jesus Garcia, but I think it's Jesus Garcia. Yeah, we love Calvinists, and I'm right. If
You
want-
take us out, Prince.
If you want good Calvinism, read Shed. If you want really good Calvinism, go read Calvin's Institutes. And if you want urban apologetics, go check out the book of which Adam Coleman contributed. What, the best chapter? Is that what I heard him say in private before the show, that his chapter was the best? Just kidding. They're all good. Go get that book and go subscribe to Tru-ID. And if you haven't liked this video, click the like button. And if you're not a subscriber, click the subscribe button. Anyway, we thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time on Trinity Radio.
Oh yeah, and subscribe to BK Apologist as well.